So it's very well known that disasters are becoming more frequent and they are affecting more people, and there's larger economic losses and larger losses to life, et cetera. And so with these increasing disaster losses are associated all sorts of new kinds of threats and vulnerabilities that increasingly become more difficult to manage. And solutions to these kinds of problems take transdisciplinary approaches. We can't deal with them just from our individual disciplines. And so it's really necessary to be able to leverage the capabilities and the capacities of various people from different disciplines who are involved in looking at these sorts of problems. Virginia Tech is very, very well positioned to do this. We have a lot of different folks in many different departments and colleges that are working in this area on disaster risk management. And so there's great opportunity to bring these capabilities together to try to deal with the sorts of issues that we're running into as we see more and more of the disaster losses as they occur. And so the general idea, sort of the overall overriding approach that the group of us that have started working together in this area, rather than approaching things from a very siloed disciplinary standpoint or viewpoint, where each of the disciplines can work and address problems which very obviously go across social and economic and structural and organizational boundaries, it really makes sense if we are going to be dealing with these types of problems to begin from within, to actually approach these problems looking at them from an initial transdisciplinary view and building solutions that grow out of the overlap rather than trying to address the overlap from outside. Okay, and so that's the basis of a lot of what we are talking about here. And there are a group of faculty who are specifically trying to develop and actively working on developing a graduate education program in disaster risk management with this transdisciplinary viewpoint as the core of what we're talking about. The program is part of the IJEP program through the Graduate School at Virginia Tech. So it's the Interdisciplinary Graduate Education Program. It has a research component. It has an educational component. We are working on developing a graduate certificate in disaster risk management and are in the process of developing the first new course in that in the sequence that will go along with that, which will be offered in fall of 2014. Okay, we'll be transdisciplinary. As you can see, we have folks from 4 different colleges and 4 different departments from within those colleges who are actively part of this team. They're working on developing this graduate program. Eventually, starting with the certificate program, but eventually the plan is to develop a transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary PhD where folks would have a home department where they take their core courses and have their focus. But then we would have this interdisciplinary program where we would get together and develop the transdisciplinary approaches and really introduce faculty and graduate students from these different areas to what the perspectives are and the approaches that are being taken in the different disciplines that they will not necessarily automatically be as familiar with. Okay, so there's lots of opportunity. Virginia Tech has the National Capital Region. You'll notice some of our faculty are located up there. We also have the main campus in Blacksburg. We are very interested in building more interest and understanding who's out there and who would like to participate in this kind of endeavor. So I really suggest and welcome if anyone would like to become more involved and would like to contribute to the development of this program. Please get in touch with me or with any of the other folks that are on the list as part of this core working group. And we would love to hear your ideas and get you involved to the extent that you're interested in becoming a part of this, to develop this program and allow us to really build on these capacities at Virginia Tech to deal with these very important problems. Okay, well, you'll notice at the very bottom of the list, so that you see him last, so that his name stands out, is our speaker for today, Dr. Mohsen Ashtiani. He will be talking about integrated disaster risk management, and he helped to get this idea of this graduate education program off the ground, and has been and will be a team member in developing the program as we move forward. Dr. Ashtiani is a distinguished professor of earthquake engineering and risk management, and he's chairman of the SP Insurance Risk Management Institute and an adjunct professor of disaster risk management at Virginia Tech. He received his PhD in earthquake engineering from the Department of Engineering, Science, and Mechanics at Virginia Tech in 1983. And he is the founder of the International Institute of Earthquake Engineering and Seismology and a pioneer in risk mitigation activities in Iran. He's the author of more than 150 papers, a number of different books and research reports in various fields that are associated with risk analysis, risk management, and risk reduction policy development. Okay, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Ashtiani.
Hello, thank you so much. First, I would like to appreciate my professor, Professor M.P. Singh. It's an honor to be, giving this lecture in front of him. I was a student for more than 6 years, and therefore I'm glad that he's doing great and he's here. Well, I came back to Virginia Tech probably after 30-some years. I graduated, left here 83, and I came back around 91 and trying to help develop this program in Virginia Tech. I'm an earthquake engineer, but past several years I'm working on the risk management. That's most engineers, after doing scientific research, now they go to the policy and social science and these kind of activities. Well, I start with this slide. Each of us look at the world in different way. Engineers, they look at the world that they want to build, they want to develop, they want to make it sure that it is safe, and the best things that they can do is to make sure everything is correct. That's the objective of engineers. They look only from the engineering dimension of the development process. Well, building needs money, needs financial resources. Therefore, financiers, bank, insurance, they look at the world only how to make money. Where they invest their money, that they can generate more money. They don't care if your building is safe or not. They want to make development in order to make profit from it. They're looking only in how these financial transactions can be done. And then we have the city managers, the politicians, the other things that they look at the world that how they can get your vote. What they can do that only attract votes. If the development, it brings, vote, go for it. If the development brings, popularity, go for it. If it's safe or not safe, if it's financially feasible, not feasible, they really don't care much about it. And there are the publics that they look at all this and they consult together, and at the end, they express their willingness by the vote or by, expressing their views. Each of these groups, they look at the world in a different way. And the problem is that since each of us look at the world in a different way and we look at our own profit, therefore we see that we work hard, but we do not, the result, the final outcome is not what we are expecting to. The integrated look is that we want development, but this financial institution should be in toward this sustainable development, and all of us, they should work together in order to have a sustainable and development and a well-established cities and urban societies. Therefore, the money would be served toward the sustainable development. Therefore, they do not look at only how the money can make money, how the money can be put in order to be sustainable. And then when it's sustainable means there's more profit at the end. This working together, everybody benefits from it. And you show a good diagram. When we work together, we all become more strong. Therefore, integrated look means that we all look at the problem with one aim with one objective and work together. That's the whole concept. This is the diagram I draw. You have a pointer here, right? Yeah. I draw this one as integrated risk management. We have a source of disasters. It might be earthquake, fault, seismicity, flood, hurricanes. They create hazards, potential hazard in our environment. And due to this hazard, occurrence of earthquake or flood, hurricane, we get vulnerability of built environment, or we get our built environment, which is everything from A to Z. Whatever is built on this ground, they're vulnerable to these hazards. And from this vulnerability, we get human, economic, and social losses. Therefore, the hazard can cause not only the vulnerability and damages, but can also cause human, economic, and social losses. And if we combine all this together, we call it risk. Therefore, risk is a combination of the source of hazard, the vulnerability, the socioeconomic, and we call it disaster risk. Now, we have, as you mentioned, we are facing with a risk in every aspect of it. I mean, we're not living in a risk-free zone or risk-free environment. We're all facing somehow with risk. Okay, now the objective is to reduce this risk again, in order to have a sustainable development. We can have different mechanisms, for example. One of the things is financial insurance, because people understand this is something that people understand. When you tell them risk, but we tell them, okay, this risk would cost you this much money, you have to pay this much money. Money talks, people understand money. Though we have to translate this risk reduction program into some kind of a financial tools that everybody is concerned as a daily affair. Now, the process of risk management is we have to establish the context for the earthquake, for the flood, for hurricane. What is the context that we were talking about? And then we do the risk assessment. Therefore, we have to identify them, we have to analyze, and we have to evaluate. When we make the risk assessment, we come, okay, I'm 30% at risk. My house is 20% at risk. How do I want to treat it? Financially, engineering, whatever method I'm going to take. Therefore, this whole thing, it has to go, if there's in the individual home, you have to communicate with your family, or if it's a city, you have to communicate with your community. You have to tell the risk to others that they're concerned with it. I mean, we do the risk assessment, but we have to communicate our risk assessment to the public, or to our family, or to the government, or to the international, arena. In order to have reduce the risk or treat the risk. And then this process also needs monitoring and review. We have to constantly see how much we're improving, what is our progress. Therefore, as you see, it's a very intercorrelated, multidisciplinary approach that we have to look at all aspects. I mean, I will explain later that each of these points involve different expertise, different specialists. Well, I just want to make some clear here that there are different terms are used. We used to use hazard in the past, disaster management, risk reduction. There are several terminologies that are existing or floating around these risk communities. I just want to make the difference between disaster risk reduction versus disaster risk management. Disaster risk reduction is part of the treatment. It is a part of the disaster risk management. If we have a risk analysis, and we do a risk communication, and we manage it in order to reduce it, risk reduction is the outcome, is what at the end we will get. I mean, if the whole integrated disaster risk management is that we reduce our risk. Therefore, disaster risk reduction is the outcome of the disaster risk management. Therefore, the DRR versus DRM take place when integrated within the agenda of each function of local government and incorporate the participation of active agent of societies. Means risk reduction can be done when everybody gets involved into the policy, into the society, in the local and state, in order to become the agenda of the country. I mean, risk reduction can be an agenda of a society when they know what they are facing with and how they can manage it. It should be governed, coordinated, and supported by the central government, and treated as a product to being a process that incorporates analysis, management, and communication. Therefore, disaster risk reduction at the end, if it wants to get to the final objective, it needs to have this policy, it needs to have the will, it needs to have become agenda of a family to a government. Another terminology that we are using is disaster management versus risk management. In the old time, these terms all used with the same meaning. Risk management or disaster risk reduction, both of them, is the management and action process for the final objective, improving safety and comfort. And we do all these things for one objective, that we should live safe in a comfort. The objective is saving human lives and resources, reduction of physical losses, building damage, city damages, and all of these things, sustainable development, and economic growth. Therefore, the risk management is a process that it should be somehow that at the end we get to these kind of objectives. However, disaster management usually refers to post-disaster actions, which it is search, rescue, and relief of affected people. Therefore, disaster management today is referred to the actions that if a disaster comes, how we can rescue, relieve, and save the people. Risk management knowledge can help us for an effective disaster management. Risk management, when it combined with a risk reduction, it creates less dependability of a society or a family or a government to a time of a disaster. When we reduce our risk, when we are reducing our risk to an affordable level, then we can do a better disaster management because we have less damages to face with. No one can claim that if the big disaster happens, we can really help the people. Look at what happened in the Fukushima, case, or the recent earthquake in Japan, or Hurricane Katrina, or the earthquakes here and there. When the losses go beyond thousands and 10,000s, it's very hard to make a good management to save all the people. But what we have to do the risk management process to reduce the number to a number that we can help. If something happened in our family, for example, from 5 people, 4 people get damaged, or get hurt, it's very hard for that one person to help the others. But if it's 1 out of 4, we can help. Therefore, the risk management is a process that not only we achieve these objectives, but we reduce our potential of damage after a disaster to a level that we can handle the case. We can send the help. We can save the people. Safe and disaster risk reduction requires, if we want to do this one, we need tools, we need model, we need reliable risk assessment. We cannot just sit down around the table and decide what kind of a policy we should do if an earthquake happens. We have to know what is our expected damage, what is our expected losses, what is our expected risk that we have. Then we should do that. Therefore, that is where the scientific community comes. The rest of them just mainly was we can do a policy and. Therefore, in order to do that, I have written here some guiding principles. If we want to do a risk management in a society or in a country. First, I call it the fact. We have to accept that we are all facing with natural disaster and we're facing with the risk. If we say, okay, we don't have it, therefore we don't have a problem. So the first thing is the fact that the risks of natural disaster exist in most parts of the world. So there is a challenge for us to solve this issue. What is our challenge? We want to reduce the risk with two final objectives. One, saving human lives, and then our resources. What we have to do that? I think today we have enough know-how and knowledge for doing disaster risk reduction. Scientific community have developed enough tools these days, enough method how to make a strong structure, how to build a safe city, how to do a well-structured society. So universities, scientists in the past decades, they have developed enough knowledge to deal with this issue. Therefore, the problem is not knowing. I mean, 30 years ago, when I used to work for Professor Singh, so many unknown were exist in earthquake. Now today, most of them are known. So what's the problem? The problem is lack of implementation of existing know-how. We know it, but we don't use it. We know so many things about our health. But how much of it we use it in our daily life? We know this is not good for you, but still we use it. We know this is not good for me, but still I do it. There is a big gap between our knowledge and putting the knowledge on the ground. And that's the biggest challenge of 21st century, how we can translate our knowledge into action, putting our knowledge on the ground. So the problem is lack of implementation of existing know-how, probably due to the usability, applicability of a developed technology. Probably what we have developed in the university are not usable. I said, okay, you should make this structure this way, it will be safe. But probably at the end when I wanted to do it, I look at my pocket and say, I don't have enough money to do it. Or the solution is too difficult. If I wanted to be healthy food, I have to pay much more money. I can't do it, therefore I go to the junk food. Therefore, I think the problem is that if we do not implement what we know, because I can blame it on the end user that you don't understand, or I can blame myself as a scientist that what I have developed is not yet doable, usable, applicable. Therefore, the role of scientists is a new role. Besides developing the knowledge and techniques, is consider all aspects of risk. Consider the social part of the technique. If this engineering solution, also consider economic consequence of it. Consider all components of risk and translate the know-how into implementable and effective solutions. I always say these medical doctors, for example, most people die. I can not die. Most people, his medical problem is headache or fever. probably 70%, or common cold. The medical doctors or pharmaceutical research, they have provided a medicine that can solve probably 60, 70% of our problems. But we engineers have not done such a thing that probably is not possible to do it. That people's problem with the risk can be solved with some kind of a simple, affordable, applicable, doable, usable, whatever you want to call it. So our scientists, we have to change our view. I mean, we used to use non-stationary, non-linearity analysis, but probably time is past. We have to do somehow simplification of our knowledge. And role of the users, the end users, the people, the public, is accept, believe, and trust on scientists and methods. Use and implement the know-how. If a doctor says, for example, engineer said, this is how your building should be safe, we should trust the experts. We do not, as a public, as a general person, we do not really always trust the experts. These are the social science challenges that need to be addressed. I mean, risk reduction or earthquake risk reduction cannot be solved only by engineers anymore. This is where the social scientists, people have to come into picture. How we talk to people. Which is my last point. How to bind all these elements and make the user to implement the know-how. It's a big challenge. How can I convince people to build safe? How can I convince an economist or a banker that it is better to think about the safety of the development in order you have a long-term benefit and more benefit than looking at these short-term benefits? And the key concept is working together. I mean, those challenges, those principles, can only be done by working together. That's a key point. Geoscientists, geotechnical, foundation engineering, architect, structure, mechanical, electrical, socioeconomists, planners, managers. We all have to work together in order the professionals, the government, end user, they benefit from our knowledge. I mean, if each of us don't work together, if we work together, what happens? We have success in risk reduction. But if we do not work together, we have a failure in risk reduction. Let me explain this. First of all, when we work together, we strengthen each other. But when we work in individual, first of all, we damage ourselves. When you want to go to a funding agency, to a government, ask for fund. Geoscientists, they go look at only the seismological aspects. Or the people in architecture look at, okay, this is how urban structure should be. Or they go to the each of us will talk to different language. The politician said, each of you look at the earthquake in different angle, and you all usually contradict each other. And since they don't want to pay money usually, they do not fund you, they look for excuses, and they don't fund you. And then what happens? Your research money shrinks. When it shrinks, our activity shrinks, and the end user at the end, it feels less the result of the knowledge development. They're working together, but if all of us go to a head of the university or president of the university, from different groups, that this is an issue, disaster risk management we want to do in Virginia Tech. We have all the resources, we have all the capabilities. We go with one voice. Instead of each of us individually go to the president of the university or government, ask for funds, if a group go, the president would have much more trust on what decision he's going to make and say, okay, I'll fund you more. Though we get ourselves, the first benefit is our own self from the research fund. And there is a fact that no scientist or no single organization can solve the problem by working alone. Now you come to the point that introduction of Chris that this DRM program with Genentech, it needs to involve everybody. It cannot run by just one colleges, one school. Because we cannot work together. We have to work together. After this introduction, now I want to go see how we can identify and calculate, make risk assessment. That was a general concept I explained. My definition of risk, there are several definitions of risk. This is a convolution. This is not these are the convolution, formulations. It's hazard, vulnerability, value. This is a social value, human value, cultural value, political value, whatever value we want to, is a soft part. This vulnerability is physical. And hazard, that if you see a graph, hazard, vulnerability, values. Divided by the governance capacity, or we can call it resilience. Different terminologies we can use. The fact is that our hazard is high. Most part of the world, for example, in earthquake, which I'm, no more, with the existence of fault, seismicity, we have a high hazard. That's a fact. First point of guiding principle. We have to accept that this exists. And I cannot reduce the hazard to 0. This parameter is not 0. And it's not in my control. I cannot do anything about it. The second parameter is vulnerability. Vulnerability of our built environment due to that hazard which I mentioned in the beginning. And this built environment that we have, it has a value for us. Economic value, social value, cultural value, security value, political value, whatever we want to name it. And this value is rising exponentially. Today, human life worth much more than 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 50 years ago. The amount of investment we have on our cities is exponentially increasing. Again, this is not in our control because we want to develop, we want to expand. Our capacity is not good enough. Or our governance of implementation of our know-how, governance of the code enforcement, the code implementation is poor. In most parts of the countries, is poor. I was buying a house here, some years ago, 5 years, 6 years ago, when they sent the inspector to check. There was a lot of missing bolts on the, columns to the foundation. No. Here with Genentech, source of knowledge. 10 minutes from here, the knowledge and the implementation, simple things, bolt of the column to the foundation is missing. Our resilience is low. Therefore our risk is high. That is the existing situation. What we want to do, we cannot control the hazard. We cannot control this one. There is only there's only two options we have that we can reduce our risk in order to have a sustainable development, have safety and security. And that is reduction of the vulnerability, means building safer. Make a good urban development, a resilient urban development. or hazard-compatible urban development. And we have to increase our capacity, improve our governance, improve the management process, improve our resilience. Then we can reduce the risk. So in order to reduce the risk, we need to create incentive for the risk reduction and risk transfer. Because this risk can never be zero. Because none of the problem is zero in the top, and this is not infinity. The risk cannot be zero. We are always faced with certain amount of risk. Therefore, we have to create incentive either to transfer this risk through the insurance and finance. That's what we do with our car. When we buy insurance, we are transferring our risk to the insurance companies. Or we reduce our risk by better driving, by safer driving. And we have to provide economic resilience to the society and individuals. I'm not going to go through the engineering aspect of vulnerability, because most of you know, you can imagine the flood comes in Colorado, or hurricane in Katrina, or earthquake. You can imagine the physical losses. We can all see destructions. It destroys from the houses to roads to electricity to ports to power plants, everything. I want to touch more on the other aspects. The socio-economic losses. We have direct material losses, property damage, infrastructures, lifeline, livestock, critical. These all have financial value to us. Look at from that, it costs, it's money. Human losses, we have death, injury, population displacement, long-term trauma. It has human value, but it has also financial value. If an engineer lost his life in an earthquake, so much investment of a society has been lost. Environmental loss. The frustration has a materialist, like for example in Fukushima. Weakening of institutions and disturbance of social structures. Some of the losses are due to the institutional capabilities are being weakened. Reduction of economic and human potential of society. Increasing the poverty, impaired in small business and industry, disable lifeline infrastructures, diversion of funds from development and from social services to, again, reconstructions. These are possible losses. For example, in the diagram, disaster loss can be physical, economic, and humanitarian, if I divide it. And we have some direct losses: structural capital, human capital, residential capital, fixed capital stock, natural habitats, and more important is this indirect losses. That sometimes these indirect losses is much more than direct losses. This might be recovered, but takes long time to recover. If you go to, for example, to those damaged area of earthquake, happened 40 years ago. Still, there are social problems in that area. For example, if you go to the Manjil earthquake, for example, that happened, the family, for example, the father has been lost. The mother kept the society and bind the family. But if the mother is lost, the family structure has been, disintegrated. There are so many long-term social problems that exist. from the some are intangible, I call it, psycho impacts, social, mental, and some are tangible, like business interruption. Human displacement. Kobe earthquake happened in 1995. Kobe port used to be the biggest port in Japan. They made a reconstruction after 1 year. I mean, it was the fastest reconstruction project. But Kobe port lost its business. It's not Kobe anymore. It lost its business. During that 1 year that people, all these shipping companies, they went to some other place, they're not going to go back again. The business interruption is something that it might never come back. And there are so many cases of it around the world. Now, what are the socioeconomic assessment that we want to do? Because again, from physical we understand more. We want to go see how we can do the socioeconomic. This is another, for example, diagram which I put it as a socioeconomic index as a center of it. Hazard can have a component in the socioeconomic index. Land use, vulnerability, population, human influence, infrastructure, economy, resilience, which is health, education, governance. All of these are parameters that are contributing to the socioeconomic index that we can measure the risk reduction through that. Because tomorrow I said, okay, I want to have a risk reduction program in Virginia Tech campus. They fund you, for example, with $2 million. 3 years from now, it's too much, huh? They ask you how much you have done it. You have to make measure in order to, because you have to have some meter. All of these are contributing. I'm just showing the Middle Eastern and Mediterranean region. These are the variables, just for example, land use, hazard, governance, population, human influence. How these things correlate together? These are unknown. These are the topic of research. This research can be done only by the social scientists, cannot be done only by the policy and government, cannot be done only with engineers. All departments, everybody have to sit together and come up with these solutions. It's not a one-man solution anymore. It's not only one college solution anymore. It needs cooperation of all type of scientists existing in this campus together to come up with some kind of index that is acceptable. We need a database for these things. The database that consists of every information we have on the Earth, on our built environment, from building to population to water, gas, infrastructures, buildings. This is a built environment. This is the value, population, economy. Therefore, we have, or this kind of process, we have to put all these together. We need all type of information in one system to look at it. Even though each of them are done by different groups, this is done by soil scientists, by engineers, but they all have to be in one integrated look. We cannot separate this issue together. We cannot look at risk management only from the hazard analysis or from the engineering or from social. We need to see all of them together in one system and then put them all together in one equation to solve it. So some keys to implementation of disaster risk management. One, comprehensiveness. We need to see the total picture of hazard from its source to its effect and impacts in order to be successful. We need expert leadership in this activity. We cannot just be political leadership. We need expert leadership required to develop the know-how as well as to assess the effectiveness, sustainability, and continuity of the program. We need to have a continuity of our programs. It is for the public and policymakers to understand, accept, believe, and implement the know-how and the program. And risk reduction can only be effectively achieved and successful through the joint effort and good management. Good management means good governance. Means the denominator of risk component and we need to be being patient. Risk reduction is not something, okay, I'm going to achieve in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. And have the consistent policy and ensure the accountability for the actions. Well, I was going to go through making some of this concept as an example that we have applied in Iran, but the time is almost up. Therefore, that will take another 20 minutes. Therefore, I will just mention, some the key component, but if I can just glance through it, very quickly, if you like. Well, I can say most of these points that I have mentioned, we are applying it in Iran. We have the earthquake, we have, history of large earthquakes. This is our fault map, this is our seismicity, this is the hazard, this is our building exposures, and this is the mean annual loss, human loss, and potential economic loss. You see, you can understand that how many disciplines are involved in this picture. From earth scientists to seismologists, earth engineering seismologists, structures, social science, human science, and all this. We have go to here. Disaster is bad, but it can always create a window of opportunity to move forward. When the earthquake happened here a year and a half ago in Virginia and shook the nation capital, it was a very good opportunity for our people in this field to launch some good programs. But in Iran, for example, we had 2 events, one in 1990, one in 2003, the Manjil earthquake and the Bam earthquake, that it created a window of opportunity for us to implement our knowledge. Well, this is the case before the Manjil. We had very high risk. I just will go through it. And then we developed a program in 1990, which mainly dealing with the increasing awareness, reduction of risk failure, and increasing knowledge, and post-disaster. I'm not going to go through the general achievement, but the point here, recognition of hazard, vulnerability, and risk by decision makers. It means we accept that we are facing it. It's a very great achievement, because that's risk communication component in the risk management process. It's very important how you communicate effectively your risk to the public, to the policymaker, to the governments. That they come and accept what you are saying. Moved from one of the components, making institutions that can do these things. We cannot just individuals do it. We had a very few institutions, and a lot of institutions with all multidisciplinary. Before that, we just seismologists, engineers. But we developed an institution that covers all disciplines. And that's what DRM in Virginia Tech wants to do. Wants to build an institute that covers all disciplines in with one objectives. This is what, for example, the institute which I founded, we start from nothing to, very good institute. I'm not going to go through it. When the BAM earthquake, the second point, before Manjil earthquake, we were very vulnerable, high risk. From the Manjil to 1990 to 2003, we developed a lot of knowledge, know-hows, but when the earthquake happened in 2003 in BAM, it showed that we had not learned all that we could have from the past earthquakes. We have not learned from Katrina completely here. We have learned not completely from, earthquake in Northridge and other things. After a while, we forget. The earthquake damage and losses were still due to elementary issues and lack of know-how. When you go survey the damages in most earthquake-prone area, or you see the damages are not due to the sophisticated engineering problems. Most losses are due to the simple, elementary, basic engineering. Yeah, we have some special cases that is, but most of them are due to the basic engineering. Implementation of existing know-how was a challenge. And unfortunately, post-earthquake action and response still prefer to mitigation and risk reduction. If you go to the UN, you go to different places, they fund you very good after a disaster. For disaster response, for disaster management response, but they don't get too much, you do not get too much fund for disaster risk management. Mitigation. And we had not we mean scientists, had not been successful in offering useful, practical, and affordable solutions. Means our research institutions will grow very good, too much fund in the universities, research, but implementation and to the end user was missing. And earthquake safety needed to become a national priority, not just a system, a priority. Therefore, after BAM, we modified that program that we had after 1990. I just want to mention these three, the green part, which is different from the past. We say that we should have, look at the risk formula, hazard, vulnerability, management, governance. Most of these are touching the governance and resilience part. The top part is usually known. Improving the quality of city planning and management. The bottom, the denominator of the formula. Zero tolerance for violation of a seismic regulation. Means we all accept violation, but we have to go to zero tolerance. We should not accept any violation. This is management, the governance, Implementation of effective risk reduction. We do the risk reduction, but it's not effective sometimes because it's not integrated. It's localized. Improve the disaster response management again. Usually we do a lot of good disaster response, but it's not good management in that disaster response. And draw up effective plan for post-earthquake recovery, reconstruction, and rehabilitation. Some of the cases, for example, I was going to put some is the school safety that we had. It's a big campaign investing a very large money on school safety. It's a $4 billion budget and another $8 billion budget for making school safe. I'm not going to go through it. Let me just pass here because, again, this is the city of Tehran, for example. That cities grow without any good urban planning, and from a small wind to all the faults. The reason of the vulnerability are same thing I have mentioned before. And this is the integrated vulnerability, not only just building, hospital, bridge, network, everything, and that's a total integrated vulnerability of the city. And then in order to change this one, we have to define we cannot just do only the building state. You have to building, land use, population distribution has to be changed, road network, facilities. We have to look at all these in order to make an urban area to a safe urban area. So we develop all these tools. We make all the parameters, for example, hazard, physical, disaster, human, all those parameters, make them together. And it came a guideline for re-urbanization, for example, where to build what. I'm not going to go through it. And we came with the new urban design of a city. And in order to transfer the old one to the new one, we have a lot of old fabrics, old parts. How we can go? So we can just, where we have to do it in order to have less human losses. So we developed models that re-urbanization based on the budget allocation. How much budget we get, where we can do the re-urbanization in order to have a least amount of human losses. Or for example, this is the land use allocation, for example, changing the risk from from risk index of 1.7 to 0.2 by changing the city. Because we cannot do re-urbanization all over the city with any methods, or you have to see where your money has to spend, how you have to relocate in order to get the most effective result. Or insurance, for example, the risk modeling for the insurance. All of the facilities for the strengthening. There's a big program on strengthening of power plants, oil, gas, everything. And we have very effective public education program in the school. All school from 1st grade to 12th grade, they get taught by what the earthquake is and how the safety is, and then we have a drill. And concluding remark, that good timing for establishment of DRM Virginia Tech, I think, timely response to the safety demand, good decision for implementing disaster reduction activities, good cooperation among the scientific communities, and excellent effort on capacity building can make visible achievement toward the resilience community, as we are doing in Iran for the earthquake. And I think Iran experience was success and can be applied to other developing countries. I think that in Virginia Tech, we have all components of expertise, from social scientists to economists to policy to politics to engineering to mechanical, electrical, that can work together in an integrated institute in order to provide expertise and advice to the end users and policymakers. And I think if we all work together, we can make a DRM Virginia Tech a success. Thank you. Yeah, if you have any question.
Does anyone have any questions?
You mentioned having the public accept, trust, and believe scientists earlier in your presentation. Do you have any specific methods for doing that?
Making the politicians accept.
No, the public, you said.
The public, yeah. I think you have to build the culture of that. You cannot do it in 1 year or 2 years. What we have done, I think, to change the public view is through the school education programs. In past 20-some years, those were in a school, now they are 30 years old, and they don't think that disasters are act of God or anything like this anymore. Therefore, they accept as a fact that this has happened. And also they accept that they can be safe only through the right methods, using the how to be prepared or building safety. I mean, allocation of $8 million budget for a school safety, it comes through convincing the public that this is something needed for your family. The amount of investment that we are doing on earthquake risk reduction in Iran is the outcome of convincing the public and the policymakers. I think you need to build a culture of safety. I mean, you have here the culture of safety of driving is very good, or many other things, but you have to build a culture of safety of a resilient community for disaster. What is lacking, I think, here is, mainly our aim is health, and, for example, driving is very, but when it comes to the building constructions or city safe, we are lacking. Because that one, people, is a daily affair. People feel it, they know they have to, every year they have to go to buy insurance. But in the point of the disaster, since it's not happening very frequently, people it's not a priority.
I noticed that you had catalyst events and crises. Is there any information about how frequently a disaster has to occur to get this up to the level some of these things would be implemented? Are we talking about every 3 years or every 30? Obviously, every 30 years doesn't work very well. Or it would be better.
I don't have a number for that. But I think these catalyst events are happening, for example, around our countries or around others more frequently. I think if we can use even those, it depends how we could use those points. I don't have a number for that. Every 4 years.
How close were the catalyst events in Iran? Is that 6 years apart?
Those two events, big event was 13 years. But we have earthquakes every year. Yes, we have a, but the point here, the earthquake that shakes the nation capitals or capital of a country is very important. You can shake anywhere, but don't shake the capitals.
I think what you said about building a culture is really interesting, because I think back to the Cold War. The disaster never happened. There weren't no triggering reminders or anything, but somehow the government created a culture of fear that resulted in extraordinary expenditures
That's right.
to prevent a disaster that never happened. So it really is a matter of creating a culture.
Therefore, the media plays a very important role. I think we should, culture of creating fear, putting culture of, creating fear for the, disasters. But we should not only create fear, we should create fear with a positive, because you don't want to, make people socially disturbed. What?
As we all are, who grew up in the 50s.
And 60s, he said.